You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
And welcome back to Mid-Morning in the Cities. I'm Sean Patrick, and it is an honor to be joined by Soledad O'Brien. She is, of course, a reporter and a host for CNN and numerous news outlets, but she is here today to talk about a documentary that she did with the help of CNN, The War Comes Home, which is going to be shown in theaters tomorrow, along with an all-star panel discussion of PTSD. Soledad O'Brien joins us, and Soledad, thank you for your time.
Hey, good morning. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Let's talk about why you're here. Soledad O'Brien presents The War Comes Home. The new Battlefront is going to be in theaters nationwide, courtesy of Fathom Events, tomorrow night, including right here at Rave 53rd and IMAX in Davenport. Soledad, this is an extraordinarily moving documentary.
Thank you. Yeah, we got tremendous access, and I think ultimately that's what it's about. It's about telling a very authentic story and using the veterans who have offered to allow us sort of into every facet of their lives, using that opportunity to highlight the struggle that they both have with post-traumatic stress and what works for them as they go through a 5.5-day program called Save a Warrior in California.
Yeah, the extraordinary bravery of these two guys who are in the documentary. I mean, when they're coming home and they're trying to readjust to life, and they find that it's just not possible for them. It's seemingly not possible for them, to the point of absolute despair. And this documentary takes you on that journey with them. Yeah,
I think it's their story as much as it's their story is also a very typical story. The guy who runs the program, his name is Jake Clark, tells me, this is the last house on the block. Like, this is a program for people who are desperate. And so what we wanted to do was to really get some insight to people who are struggling with post-traumatic stress themselves, or maybe they have family members who are dealing with it. I think it's especially hard on the family. So you could see a very authentic portrayal of what happens before they go off to this program, what works for them, what doesn't work, and then what happens when they come back. It's been interesting. I've kept in touch with these guys since we shot this one cohort number 10, and it's been interesting to see sort of their progress and the things that they still are working on. But, it's interesting to me that there's just so much support for veterans, and yet a lot of ways I think civilians don't necessarily know what to do. We say a lot of like, hey, thanks for your service, or, on planes you get up and you clap when veterans, members of the military hop on a flight. But beyond that, I'm not sure we're really doing enough to help remove the stigma of post-traumatic stress.
CNN anchor Soledad O'Brien, our guest today. We're talking about The War Comes Home, a documentary on soldiers dealing with PTSD. We'll continue this conversation after this. Mid-Morning in the Cities, presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9.
You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
Anchor and news person Soledad O'Brien, our guest today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. We're talking about Soledad O'Brien presents The War Comes Home, the new Battlefront. It'll be screened in theaters, including right here in the Quad Cities on Tuesday night. There's going to be an all-star panel following the showing of the documentary, including people like Adam Carolla and, of course, actor J.R. Martinez, who has a very unique perspective on this.
Yeah, it's been interesting. What we wanted to do was have a panel of folks who would not just comment on the documentary per se, but talk about the broader issues. My goal is that we're really having a thoughtful conversation about what we can do today for veterans, especially as we head right into Memorial Day. So our panel includes experts from the IAVA, who focus obviously on Iraq and Afghanistan. Team Rubicon joined our panel, the National Association of Black Veterans. The Bush Institute had a representative who's amazing, talking about some of the issues that he had. He's from a military family. His dad, his grandfather, his wife, his sons, all military. Someone from the Dole Foundation, which focuses on caregivers and what the role of caregivers should be and how they could get and use support. And then, of course, we have civilians who talk a lot about the civilian-military gap and what can be done to advocate for veterans as civilians who, today, more than, say, 60 years ago, I think the percentage of Americans that serve is tiny, and the percentage of people who know a veteran is smaller.
Talk about the reaction that you've had so far from people who've seen the documentary.
It's been amazing. I think what people will see is that it's just a very beautiful documentary. It's beautifully shot, but it's also very intimate. We are in their lives. Literally, our photographers slept on the couches of these two guys. and followed them nonstop over this period of time to really see. I mean, one of the most moving things is when Delon, one of the guys, says, we asked him, so what does it feel like to be suicidal and have post-traumatic stress? And he says, it's like being in a burning building. I don't want to jump, but the only way to get relief is to jump. And so you jump. I don't want to die, but I just can't take my life anymore. And it's just so heartbreaking. So to watch him go through this program and come out the other side hopeful, his life dramatically changed, is pretty phenomenal.
CNN anchor Soledad O'Brien is our guest today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. We are talking about a documentary that she has helped produce that will be in theaters tomorrow night. In fact, it'll be here in the Quad Cities at Rave 53rd and IMAX if you would like to go see this extraordinary documentary called The War Comes Home, as reported by Soledad O'Brien following a pair of soldiers through their journey dealing with PTSD. We'll continue this conversation with Soledad O'Brien after this and wrap things up. You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities, presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9.
You're listening to Mid-Morning in the Cities on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.
We're talking with Soledad O'Brien today on Mid-Morning in the Cities. Soledad O'Brien presents The War Comes Home, the new Battlefront. Will be shown at Rave 53rd and IMAX here in Davenport on Tuesday night. This roundtable discussion, of course, your group, your production company, Starfish, and along with Fathom Events putting together. How did you two come together?
We just thought it would be a great opportunity to open our film up to a Fathom event. It means that we can show it in theaters across the country, which I think is pretty amazing. It allows us to be in everybody's, storytelling for the night. On Tuesday night, you can get your tickets online at fathomevents.com or go to your local theater. Figure out what, the same place will have the listing of the theaters. I think it's just a great way to show the story across the country. And then also this conversation. It's really, really important.
It's a hugely important conversation, and of course finding more support for programs like the one that's featured in this documentary is extraordinarily important. Has there been talk of expanding this particular type of therapy?
Yeah, absolutely. I think what was interesting to me is that Save a Warrior uses modalities that a lot of other organizations use. Transcendental meditation has a long history of being seen as valuable, and the data shows that it helps a lot with post-traumatic stress. There are many organizations that use that. Equine therapy, lots of organizations that use equine therapy, ropes courses. So I think Save a Warrior puts it together in a really interesting and compelling way. But it's not, there are other organizations that do the same thing. We wanted to focus on what is working and how could these things be repeated so that every veteran who's suffering and struggling could have an opportunity.
Well, Soledad O'Brien, thank you so much for your time. Of course, we'll send everybody to
Thank you.
Tomorrow night. Soledad O'Brien presents The War Comes Home, the new Battlefront, in theaters Tuesday night. Soledad, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
If you missed any part of this interview with CNN anchor Soledad O'Brien, you can catch it online in a few moments in our Mid-Morning in the Cities podcast at QuadCityDailyNews.com, QuadCityDailyNews.com, powered by local radio. Mid-Morning in the Cities presented by Curves Davenport on Rewind 93.9 WYEC.